What makes a man turn from painter to predator, from artist to assassin? Step into the shadows of Victorian London and follow the chilling dance of death, where the line between beauty and horror is fatally thin. Now, as we prepare to dive into our story, make sure you're comfortable. Are you ready? It's story time. Sunlight crept through the gaps in the heavy curtains, finding its way to the artist's table. The room was filled with the rich smell of oil paint, a scent that had become as vital to Walter Sickert as the very air he breathed. It was a sanctuary, a hidden world where each hue and shade held a secret, a promise of creation. But it was the crimson that called to him, a siren's song that beckoned from the palette. Walter's hand trembled slightly as he reached for his brushes, each one a familiar friend, each one a tool with which he carved his soul into canvas. How he loved them, these extensions of his very being, these keys to a world only he could see. His mornings were a ritual, a slow and deliberate dance with his art. He would choose his brushes with the care of a lover selecting a bouquet, examining each one for its character, its essence. They were not mere tools. They were part of him, whispers of a darker craving that lurked just beneath the surface. The mixing of colors was a symphony, a harmony of tones that sang to him in a language only he understood. But it was always the scarlet that captivated him, that drew him in and wouldn't let go. There was something in it that spoke to a hidden place within him, something primal, something hungry. He lost himself in the dance, the blending of hues, the delicate balance between shade and light. His hands moved with a grace that belied the strength beneath, each stroke a caress, each touch a promise. And as he lost himself in his work, something else stirred, something that watched and waited, a darkness that lurked in the corners of his mind. A part of him that was never far away, a part that was awakened by the smell of the oil, the touch of the canvas, the dance of the ruby hue. In those quiet morning hours, as the rest of London lay sleeping, Walter Sickert, the painter, the artist, the man, was alive. But there was something else there too, something that watched and waited, something that knew that the dance was just beginning. The clatter of brushes and the murmur of voices filled the studio as students and fellow artists moved about in a ballet of creativity. Walter Sickert's presence was a magnetic force, drawing them into his orbit. He moved among them, his eyes alight with passion, his hands deftly guiding theirs. A young woman, Emily, her face flushed with youthful zeal, looked up at him, eyes wide. "Mr. Sickert, how do you find the essence of a scene? How do you capture the soul of what you're painting?" Walter's face softened, and his hand gently guided hers, shaping the lines and colors on her canvas. "It's about seeing, Emily, truly seeing. Not just with your eyes, but with your heart. It's about feeling the subject, becoming one with it. It's a dance, my dear, a dance with light and shadow." His words were not just instruction, they were poetry, an invitation to a world beyond the mundane, a world where art was not merely a creation, but a living, breathing entity. But amid the passion, amid the teaching and the sharing, there was a nagging frustration, a feeling of being trapped. Walter's own work seemed to elude him, seemed to dance just beyond his grasp. The more he reached for it, the more it slipped away. His students were thriving, blossoming under his guidance, but his own canvas remained a mystery, a challenge he couldn't conquer. As the day wore on, the studio filled with the sounds of success and discovery, but Walter's own canvas remained untouched, taunting him, daring him to find what was missing. The colors were there, the shapes and lines, but the soul was elusive, hidden in a place he couldn't reach. And as the shadows lengthened and the light began to fade, Walter found himself standing before his easel, his eyes fixed on the canvas, his mind adrift in a sea of frustration. The others had gone, leaving him alone with his thoughts, his doubts. He reached out, his hand trembling, his fingers touching the canvas as if it were a lover, as if it could answer the questions that plagued him. But the canvas remained silent, and the frustration grew, a dark cloud that hovered, a reminder of something he couldn't quite grasp, something that danced just out of reach. And as the darkness settled and the studio grew quiet, Walter Sickert, the teacher, the guide, the frustrated artist, knew that the dance was not over, that the challenge was still there, waiting for him, taunting him, daring him to find what was hidden. The studio had grown quiet, the echoes of the day's lessons fading into the silence. Walter Sickert stood alone, his eyes fixed on a single hue that seemed to pulse with life, drawing him in, speaking to him in a language only he could understand. It was the vermilion. There were many shades on his palette, each one a unique voice, each one a different song. But it was the fiery shade that called to him, the one that danced in his dreams, the one that seemed to hold a secret, a hidden truth that only he could see. He picked up a brush, its bristles stained with the evidence of his obsession, and dipped it into the vibrant color, watching as it clung to the brush, alive and alluring. It was more than a color. It was a siren's song, a lover's embrace, a dance that only he could hear. He brought the brush to the canvas, his hand guided by something beyond his control, something primal and raw. The color flowed from the brush, finding its place on the canvas, becoming part of the story he was trying to tell. He lost himself in the hue, in the way it moved, the way it spoke to him. He could see it in the sunset, in the blush of a lover's cheek, in the very essence of life itself. But there was more, something deeper, something that lurked just beneath the surface, something that whispered of darkness, of a hidden place that only he could see. He painted for hours, the color becoming a dance, a ballet of emotion and sensation. It was a love affair, a passion that consumed him, that drove him to places he had never been, places he didn't understand. He stepped back, his eyes wide, his heart pounding. The hue had taken him, had led him on a journey, had shown him things he couldn't quite grasp. He could feel it in his very soul, a longing, a craving, a need that went beyond mere color. He reached out, his fingers trembling, and touched the shade, feeling it, tasting it, becoming one with it. It was alive, and it was calling to him, beckoning him to follow, to explore, to discover. And as the night wore on, and the studio grew dark, Walter Sickert, the painter, the artist, the lover of that particular shade, knew that the dance was not over, that it was still there, still calling, still waiting. He knew that he was part of it, that it was part of him, that it was a dance that would never end, a love that would never die. The studio had become a sanctuary, a place of creation and obsession. The color had taken Walter Sickert, had led him down a path he could not escape, had shown him things that only he could see. But there was more, something hidden, something that lurked in the shadows, something that whispered of a darkness that went beyond mere color. As the night wore on and the shade began to fade, Walter found himself drawn to a corner of the studio, a place that was hidden from view, a place that held a secret. He opened a drawer, his hands trembling, his eyes wide. Inside, hidden from the world, were sketches, drawings that spoke of a darkness, of a place that went beyond mere art. They were unsettling, disturbing, images that hinted at something more sinister, something that went beyond mere obsession. They were sketches of women, faces twisted in terror, bodies contorted in pain. They were images that spoke of violence, of a hunger that went beyond mere desire. Walter stared at the sketches, his heart pounding, his mind reeling. He knew what they were, knew what they meant, knew that they were a part of him, a part of the darkness that lurked within. He closed the drawer, his hands shaking, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He knew that he was on the edge, that he was teetering on the brink of something he couldn't control. He knew that the color was not just a hue, not just a passion. It was a calling, a beckoning, a voice that whispered of a place that only he could see. And as he stood there, alone in the studio, surrounded by the evidence of his obsession, he knew that he was lost, that he was part of something that went beyond mere art, beyond mere passion. He knew that he was part of the darkness, part of the secret, part of the dance that would never end. And as the night wore on and the studio grew quiet, Walter Sickert, the painter, the artist, the lover of that vivid shade, knew that he was not alone, that the darkness was still there, still calling, still waiting. The sky darkened as the sun's last rays stretched across the horizon, painting the world with shades of red and orange. Shadows transformed the city into a canvas, and with it, Walter Sickert underwent a transformation as well. Filled with the passion of creation, the studio gave way to another place, another time, another version of Walter. The artist, who loved red, became something else, something cold, something precise. Looking into the mirror, Walter's eyes lost their passion for creation, replaced by a cold precision, a calculating gaze that saw beyond mere flesh and bone. No longer just a painter or a lover of red, he evolved into something more profound, something beyond mere art and passion. Walter changed his attire, trading paint-splattered clothes for a more formal outfit suitable for the night's journey. He donned a black suit, tailored to fit his frame, a crisp white shirt, and a tie the color of blood. His shoes, polished to a shine, reflected the setting sun's last rays. With narrow eyes and lips pressed into a thin line, he examined himself in the mirror. Prepared and ready for what lay ahead, he felt the anticipation of a dance that would never end. Leaving the studio, the door closed with a soft click. Walter left behind the world of art, passion, and red, stepping into the night, into the darkness, into a place only he could see. A maze of streets and alleys lay before him, a canvas waiting to be painted, a story waiting to be told. With purpose, determination, and a precision that transcended mere desire, he walked through the city. Walter Sickert, the painter, the artist, the lover of red, had become something else, something indescribable, something beyond mere words. He was the darkness, the secret, the whisper of a place only he could see. As the sun set and the city transformed into a world of shadows, he realized he was not alone. The night was still there, calling, waiting. In a secluded room, hidden from prying eyes, Walter's transformation continued. The world of shadows beckoned him forward, leading him down an inescapable path. A dance that required precision, care, and purpose awaited him. Carefully arranged on a table lay his tools. Not the brushes and palettes of an artist, but something else, something that spoke of a different kind of art, a different kind of passion. Surgical tools, each one selected with care, gleamed in the dim light. A scalpel, a pair of forceps, a saw-all ready to cut through flesh and bone. Examining them with narrow eyes and a focused mind, Walter saw them as extensions of himself, part of the darkness within. They were part of his dance, his secret, his hidden place. He picked them up, feeling their weight, balance, and purpose. They were not mere tools, they were part of him, part of the cold precision that had taken over, part of a hunger that transcended mere desire. Equating them with his paintbrushes, each chosen for a specific task, he realized this was a different kind of art, a different kind of creation. It was something beyond mere color and form. A dance that required precision, care, and purpose awaited him. A dance that spoke of a place only he could see, a place that called, beckoned, and led him down a path he could not escape. As he looked at his tools, ready for the night's journey, he knew he was prepared for what lay ahead. No longer just Walter Sickert, the painter, the artist, the lover of red, he had become something else, something indescribable. He was the darkness, the secret, the whisper of a place only he could see. Ready for the dance, the night, the shadows, he left the room, his tools carefully packed, his mind focused, his heart pounding. The fog was thick in Whitechapel that night, a living entity that shrouded the streets in mystery and allure. It clung to the cobblestones, danced around the gas lamps, and whispered secrets in the cold night air. Walter moved through it, part of the crowd yet apart, a shadow among shadows, his mind focused, his senses sharpened. The streets of Whitechapel bustled with life, filled with the hustle and bustle of a city that never slept. People moved to and fro, lost in their thoughts, unaware of the shadow that lurked among them, the predator that hunted, watched, and waited. Walter's eyes narrowed as he moved through the crowd, his senses sharpened, his mind focused. He was hunting, seeking, searching, part of the crowd yet apart, a shadow among shadows. He was looking for something, someone, a piece of art that called to him, that spoke to him, that beckoned him forward. He moved with grace and precision, his steps deliberate, his mind focused. He was part of the night, part of the shadows, part of a dance that would never end. The fog clung to him, hid him, embraced him. He was not just Walter Sickert, the painter, the artist, the lover of red. He was something else, something that went beyond mere words, beyond mere description. He was the darkness, the secret, the whisper of a place only he could see. And as he wandered the fog-filled streets of Whitechapel, as he moved through the crowd, as he hunted, as he watched, as he waited, he knew that he was not alone, that the night was still there, still calling, still waiting. He was part of the dance, part of the night, part of the shadows. He was ready, ready for what lay ahead, ready for the journey, ready for the art. The streets of Whitechapel were alive with activity, alive with the sounds and smells and tastes of a city that never slept. But Walter was apart, a shadow among shadows, a predator that hunted, watched, and waited. And as he moved through the fog, as he wandered the streets, as he became one with the night, he knew that he was not alone, that the night was still there, still calling, still waiting. A hint of movement caught his eye, a flash of color in the dimly lit street. It was her. He saw her through the curtain of fog and the throng of people, a figure in the distance, graceful and delicate. He could see the way she moved, the way she carried herself, the way she laughed and talked and smiled. She was art, pure and beautiful, a piece of perfection that called to him, that spoke to him, that beckoned him forward. Her name was Lily. He didn't know how he knew, but he did. It was there, in her eyes, in her smile, in the way she moved. She was Lily, and she was perfect. She was prey and art, beauty and grace, innocence and allure. She was everything he wanted, everything he needed, everything he sought. He watched her from a distance, his eyes never leaving her, his mind analyzing, calculating, planning. He saw the way she moved, the way she laughed, the way she talked to the people around her. He saw the way her eyes sparkled, the way her lips curved, the way her hair danced in the wind. He saw her, truly saw her, in a way that no one else could. He saw the art in her, the beauty in her, the perfection in her. He saw the way her body moved, the way her mind worked, the way her soul spoke. She was Lily, and she was perfect. She was prey and art, beauty and grace, innocence and allure. She was his, and he knew it. He could feel it, deep in his bones, deep in his soul. She was his, and he would have her. He watched her as she moved through the streets, as she laughed and talked and smiled. He watched her as she danced through the crowd, as she became one with the night, as she became part of a dance that would never end. He watched her, and he knew. He knew that she was his, that she was the one, that she was the piece of art that he had been seeking, that he had been hunting, that he had been waiting for. She was Lily, and she was perfect. She was prey and art, beauty and grace, innocence and allure. She was everything he wanted, everything he needed, everything he sought. And as he watched her, as he studied her, as he analyzed her, he knew that the time had come. The dance was ready to begin, the night was ready to unfold, the art was ready to be created. He was ready, and he knew that she was too. She was Lily, and she was perfect. She was prey and art, beauty and grace, innocence and allure. She was his, and he would have her. Lily was laughing, a musical sound that sent shivers down his spine. Her eyes sparkled, cheeks flushed, lips as red as cherries. Standing on the corner, she was talking to a friend, unaware of the eyes that watched her, the mind that studied her, the heart that desired her. With grace, he moved toward her, weaving through the crowd, his eyes never leaving her. His steps were measured, his pace unhurried, his movements fluid. Like a hunter stalking his prey, he was closing in, ready to strike. As he approached, he put on a charming and disarming smile. Straightening his jacket, adjusting his hat, and smoothing his hair, he maintained the demeanor of a gentleman, a man of refinement and taste. He would approach her with respect, courtesy, and charm. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice smooth as silk, his tone warm as honey. "Might I have a moment of your time?" Lily turned, her eyes wide, her smile fading. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment, he saw something in her eyes, something that made his heart beat faster, something that made his blood run cold. But then it was gone, replaced by curiosity, by interest, by intrigue. She smiled, a hesitant smile, a cautious smile, and he knew that he had her. "Of course, sir," she said, her voice sweet, her tone polite. "What can I do for you?" He smiled back, a genuine smile, a sincere smile. "I couldn't help but notice you from across the street," he said, his words carefully chosen, his tone carefully modulated. "You have a certain grace about you, a certain elegance. I was wondering if you might allow me to walk you home." Lily's eyes widened, her cheeks flushed, her lips parted. She looked at him, really looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes, something that made his heart beat faster, something that made his blood run hot. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her voice trembling, her tone unsure. "I don't usually walk with strangers." He leaned in, his eyes soft, his voice gentle. "I understand," he said, his words soothing. "But I assure you, I mean you no harm. I am a gentleman, after all, a man of honor and integrity. You have nothing to fear from me." Lily looked at him intently, and he saw something in her eyes that quickened his heartbeat. She smiled slowly, trustingly. "All right," she said softly. "I'll walk with you." His smile was triumphant and victorious. He had her, and he knew it. She was his, and she would be his forever. Lily's laughter filled the air again, a delightful symphony that enchanted him. Her eyes sparkled as she talked, her hands gesturing, her body swaying with grace. She was captivating. But as they walked and talked, his mind began to wander. He watched her lips, red and luscious, and her body, soft and supple, imagining how they would taste and feel. He listened to her sweet voice but was drawn to the siren's call of the hunt. He looked into her bright eyes but saw only the prize, the conquest. She was art, a masterpiece to be admired and possessed. She was an object, a means to an end. He knew what he was doing, thinking, feeling, but he couldn't stop himself. The urge was too strong, the desire too great. He wanted her, needed her, craved her. He would have her, take her, own her. He would possess her completely. He would make her his, perfect and beautiful. He would make her art, a masterpiece, a legend. She was his muse, his obsession. She was his creation and destruction. She was his love and hate, his passion. She was his. As they walked, he felt himself changing, transforming. He was no longer just a man. He was a force, a power, a god. He was the artist, and she was his canvas. He was the master, and she was his slave. He was the predator, and she was his prey. He was alive, and she would be dead. He guided Lily down the dimly lit streets, the world fading into the background. The dance had begun, a waltz through Whitechapel's alleys, their movements synchronized. It was a dance of intimacy and destiny. He took her hand, and she followed, trust in her eyes, doubt in her heart. She was drawn to his charm, his grace, his power. She was a moth to a flame, a victim to a killer. The path they took was winding, the destination known only to him. He led her through shadows and mists, through darkness and fear. The way was narrow and treacherous. He was deliberate and ruthless. He was a hunter, a killer, a monster. He was the Reaper, the Devil, the Ripper. He knew where he was going, what he was doing, who he was taking. He had chosen the place and time, planned the murder, the attack, the escape. He had watched, studied, and analyzed her. He had stalked, followed, and hunted her. He had lured, enticed, and seduced her. He had chosen her, and now he would take her. She was beautiful and perfect, his canvas, his clay, his instrument. He was the artist, the sculptor, the maestro. As they walked, he felt her body tense, her breathing shallow, her heart pounding. She was nervous, anxious, scared. She sensed something was wrong, off, amiss. But she trusted him, believed in him, relied on him. She was drawn to him, enchanted, captivated. She was his, and he was hers. Finally, they arrived at a secluded alley, hidden from prying eyes. The walls were high, the entrance narrow, the escape limited. The ground was wet, the air cold, the night dark. He turned to her, his eyes cold, his smile warm, his intentions clear. He had brought her here to this place, this moment, this end. He had led her to her doom, her fate, her death. The dance was over, the courtship complete, the ritual done. The time had come, the moment was here, the end was near. They looked into each other's eyes, and in that instant, they both knew. A silence hung in the cold, damp air, filled with anticipation, tension, dread. It was a silence that spoke volumes, told tales, whispered secrets. It was deafening, suffocating, damning. He looked at Lily, his eyes filled with longing and detachment, passion and coldness, life and death. He was a riddle, a paradox, a contradiction. She looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion, realization, trust, betrayal, love, fear. She was a victim, prey, sacrifice. He reached out, his touch gentle, his grip firm. He was tender, loving, deadly. He was a lover, partner, killer. She reached back, her touch hesitant, her grip weak. She was confused, scared, desperate. She was a woman, human, soul. He pulled her close, his embrace warm, his kiss sweet. He was close, near, here. He was the end, the destroyer, the finisher. She leaned in, her body trembling, her breath ragged. She was trapped, caught, lost. She was the beginning, the creation, the start. He whispered in her ear, his words soothing, his voice calming. He was soft, gentle, firm. He was the sentence, the judgment, the verdict. She listened, her mind racing, her heart pounding. She was helpless, powerless, hopeless. She was the question, the doubt, the uncertainty. And then, in an instant, it happened. The first cut, wound, kill. The first pain, shock, end. He moved with precision, accuracy, skill. He was swift, quick, efficient. He was the blade, the edge, the point. She reacted with surprise, disbelief, horror. She was stunned, shocked, shattered. She was the blood, the flesh, the bone. The sound was soft, the sensation sharp, the effect profound. The cut was deep, the wound wide, the damage done. He looked at her, his eyes filled with satisfaction, pleasure, triumph. He was victorious, successful, content. He was the master, the conqueror, the victor. She looked at him, her eyes filled with terror, agony, defeat. She was beaten, broken, doomed. She was the loser, the defeated, the vanquished. The art had begun, the creation started, the masterpiece underway. The process was in motion, the journey commenced, the destination near. He was the artist, she was the canvas. He was the sculptor, she was the clay. He was the creator, she was the creation. In that dank, shadowed alley, a scene unfolded that was at once a macabre dance and a work of terrible art. The artist of the obscene, a man consumed by his craft, worked with a dedication that was both mesmerizing and horrifying, each movement exact, each cut a stroke on his living canvas. The tools in his hands sang a symphony of death, each gleam of cold steel a note in a chilling melody. Gliding was the scalpel, Slashing was the knife, pinching and pulling were the forceps. Orchestrated, calculated, practiced to perfection, everything was. Her body served as his easel, and with shades of red and black, colors of life and death, he painted. Carving and sculpting, each incision became a line in a poem, each wound a word in a dreadful tale. The horror of his creation was contrasted with its dark beauty. Here was a violation of nature, yet something that transcended the mundane, transcended morality, transcended humanity. Monstrous and divine, ugly and exquisite, foul and pure, it was all these things. Muted were her cries, stifled by fear and pain, her tears hidden in shadows and blood. Futile was her struggle, meaningless her resistance, sealed her fate. Never did his focus waver, never did his hands tremble, never did his heart falter. In his element, he became a dark deity in a world of his making, a lord of suffering and despair. Life ebbed away from her, flowing in rivers of crimson, seeping into the cracks of the dirty pavement, staining the night with her essence. Once lively and bright, her eyes became dull and lifeless. Once warm and vibrant, her body turned cold and limp. The sounds of the city faded away, the world receded into the background, and all that existed was the artist, his subject, and the act. Time lost meaning, space lost substance, reality lost relevance. A dance of madness, a waltz of doom, a tango of terror unfolded. A ballet of brutality, a salsa of savagery, a rumba of ruin emerged. Art, death, love, hate, everything, nothing, the beginning, the end, it was all these things. The artist completed his work, his masterpiece, his magnum opus, the final cut, the final wound, the final kill, the final pain, the final shock, the final end. Standing back, his breath ragged, his heart pounding, his soul aflame, he looked at her. His eyes filled with passion, with obsession, with madness. He looked at her, and he saw himself. Stepping back, his chest heaving with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, his eyes fixated on the creation before him. The smell of iron and the raw scent of mortality lingered in the air, tantalizing his senses. Slick with the residue of his dark craft, his hands hung at his sides, tools of both destruction and creation. The lifeless form on the ground, a twisted sculpture of flesh and bone, was now silent and still, its essence captured in a moment of dark beauty. In it, he saw a reflection of the chaos of existence, a mirror to the soul's deepest fears and desires. It was a piece he had been working on for years, a masterpiece that had taken form only in the recesses of his twisted mind. Precise were the strokes of his blade, deep and unerring were the cuts, each wound a symbol, each scar a story. With the lifeblood of his subject, he painted, using her very essence to bring his vision to reality. The alley, once a place of filth and decay, had been transformed into a gallery, a sacred space where his dark art could be displayed. The ground was his canvas, the walls his frame, the night his lighting. All had conspired to create this moment, this revelation, this triumph. Circling the lifeless form, studying it from every angle, absorbing every detail, he saw the terror in her eyes, now frozen in time, and he felt a connection, a bond that went beyond mere flesh. He had taken her life, yes, but he had given her immortality. She would live on in his memory, in his art, in his obsession, a creation like no other, a work that defied description, that transcended understanding. It was a testament to his skill, his vision, his genius. A statement, a declaration, a challenge. It was all these things. Perfection. The silence of the night was broken only by the sound of life in a place of death, his breathing. He stood there for what seemed like an eternity, lost in thought, lost in emotion, lost in the moment. And then, with a final glance, a final touch, a final farewell, he turned and walked away, leaving behind his masterpiece, his legacy, his soul. He knew that it would be discovered, that it would be studied, that it would be analyzed. He knew that it would be condemned, that it would be reviled, that it would be feared. He knew that it would be misunderstood, that it would be misinterpreted, that it would be misrepresented. But he didn't care. He had seen it, he had touched it, he had created it, and he knew that it was beautiful. Upon leaving the dark gallery, he made his way to a secluded corner where his case of instruments awaited. Arranged with loving care, each in its specific place, a testament to their unique role in his art, the tools were. With the practiced ease of an artist cleaning his brushes, he began the meticulous process of purging his implements of their work. A small bowl of warm water infused with antiseptics was his palette now. Into it, he dipped his scalpel, watching the red dissolve into a gentle swirl. Then he wiped it clean, every movement deliberate and filled with purpose. Each tool followed, each receiving the same care and attention. The knife, the clamps, the needles, all were cleaned, all were purified. No haste in his actions, no desire to escape or to forget. This was part of the art, part of the ritual. He reveled in it, the sensation of the metal in his hands, the memories of their use, the anticipation of their future endeavors. As he worked, his mind was calm, unburdened by guilt or remorse. Satisfaction, a sense of completion, a sense of achievement. He felt all these things. His tools were an extension of himself, instruments of his will, expressions of his soul. Admirably they had performed, and they deserved this care, this reverence. Sparkling in the dim light, the blades reflected his eyes, his soul, his essence. They were him, and he was them. Together they had created beauty. Together they had brought his vision to life. Partners in this dance, this courtship of death, they were. They understood him, they obeyed him, they fulfilled him. Finally, he closed the case, sealing the tools in their dark chamber, preserving them for the next performance. Ready, eager, they would be. Part of him they were, and he was part of them. The water, now a muddied crimson, was disposed of with care. The gloves, the apron, the remnants of his work, all were consigned to the fire, consumed by the flames, transformed into ashes. Complete was the ritual. He looked at his hands, now clean and pure, the hands of an artist, the hands of a creator. Well, they had done their work, and they had done it well. Regret, doubt, fear, he felt none of these things. An artist he was, and he had created art. The fog hung heavy over the London streets, a thick curtain that masked the world's ugliness. Out from the hidden alley he stepped, his tools secured and his art complete. Warm, almost welcoming, the night's chill felt, as if the city itself approved of his work. Softly echoing on the cobblestones, his footsteps merged with the distant sounds of carriages and late-night wanderers. Gracefully, he moved, his gait smooth and measured, his body relaxed. Satisfaction filled him, a deep and abiding pleasure that came from a job well done. In his mind, the image of his creation lingered, a beautiful composition that would soon be discovered, admired, and feared. He reveled in the thought, knowing that his art would be talked about, debated, analyzed. It would inspire terror and fascination, revulsion and awe. It would be remembered. As he walked, the fog wrapped around him, shrouding him in its embrace. One with it, part of it he felt. It hid him from the world, and he hid in it. An ally, an accomplice, a muse it was. Quiet was the city, slumbering, unaware of what had transpired. Locked in their homes, safe and warm, its inhabitants were, oblivious to the dance of death that had taken place in their midst. To horror and chaos, they would wake, but gone, vanished into the fog, lost in the shadows. He would be. His mind drifted to the future, to the next piece, the next creation. Thrilling him, the anticipation, exciting him, the possibilities. Evolving, growing, reaching new heights his art was. On the cusp of something great, something extraordinary he was. His name, the world would know. His genius they would recognize. His art they would see and tremble. Into the abyss they would look and find beauty. With a last look at the dark alley, he turned the corner, blending into the fog, becoming one with the night. The city sighed, the wind whispered, the shadows danced. He was gone. The sun peeked through the heavy drapes of his studio, casting a soft golden light over the room. Paintings lined the walls, works of beauty and grace that hid the shadows within the artist's soul. A comforting scent of fresh paint and turpentine filled the air, speaking of creativity and passion. Awakening with a start, his mind still lingered on the night's work, the thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of creation. But that was then, and this was now. No longer was he the artist of death, the sculptor of fear. Now he was simply a painter, a teacher, a lover of beauty. With practiced ease, the night was washed away, cleansing him of the gloom that had filled him. Dressed in simple, unassuming clothes, he chose soft colors that spoke of gentleness and warmth. His eyes, cold and calculating the night before, were now soft and kind, filled with empathy and understanding. In the kitchen, he prepared a simple breakfast of tea and toast, moving with fluid grace. A gentle tune was hummed, a melody of love and hope, a song that hid the storm within. Soon his students would arrive, eager young minds ready to learn and grow. They looked up to him, admired him, saw him as a mentor and a guide. They knew nothing of his other life, of the shadows that lurked beneath the surface. Only the artist, the teacher, the friend was visible to them. Welcoming them with a smile, his voice was gentle and encouraging. They chatted about art and life, dreams and aspirations. Laughter and jokes were shared, along with stories and ideas. He became one of them, part of the group, a beacon of light and inspiration. But as he spoke, laughed, and taught, the shadows lingered, hidden but never far away. They whispered to him, called to him, tempted him. Inseparable and eternal, they were a part of him. The day wore on, the sun rose and fell, and he played his part. Painting and sketching, teaching and mentoring, living and loving, he was the friendly, unassuming creator, the man of passion and grace. But the night would come, and with it, the gloom. He knew it, accepted it, embraced it. It was who he was. The evening settled in, a cool breeze whispering through the open windows of the studio. The laughter and chatter of the day had given way to profound silence. The room was his and his alone. This was the time he had been waiting for, the moment when inspiration would take hold, when his dual existence would merge into something transcendent. A blank canvas stood before him, its untouched surface beckoning, challenging, promising. Approaching it with reverence, a quiet excitement filled him. The night's work had been gruesome, yes, but it was also profound, a dance with the primal forces of life and death. It was a spark, a flame, a fire that would ignite his creativity. Deftly, his hands selected colors and brushes with an artist's intuition. Shades and hues were chosen that spoke of the night, of shadows and mystery, of beauty and terror. His heart raced, his mind whirled, his soul soared. He was ready. The brush met the canvas, a gentle kiss that set off a storm. Painting with fury, passion, and wild abandon, he was no longer the friendly, unassuming artist, the gentle teacher. He was a creator, a visionary, a man possessed. Twisting and turning, the painting took shape, a dance of color and form. It was a scene from the night, but not a literal one. It was something deeper, more profound. It was a feeling, an emotion, a sensation. It was terror and beauty, obscurity and light. It was life and death. Losing himself in the work, the hours slipped away unnoticed. The painting consumed him, became him. He was no longer painting the scene. He was living it, experiencing it, becoming it. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he stepped back, his chest heaving, his body drenched in sweat. The painting was done, a masterpiece born from the darkest recesses of his soul. He looked at it, his eyes wide, his heart pounding. It was beautiful, a work of art that transcended the ordinary, that spoke of something more. It was a reflection of him, of his duality, of his twisted genius. And yet, as he looked, as he admired, a chill ran down his spine, a sense of unease, a hint of doubt. Had he gone too far? Had he revealed too much? Had he exposed his shadows for all to see? Shaking his head, he pushed the thoughts away. It was just a painting, after all, a piece of art. It was not a confession, not a revelation. It was simply a creation, a work of beauty born from the depths of his soul. Or was it? The studio settled into a deep silence, as if holding its breath, watching, waiting. The artist stood, his back to the world, his face to his creation. His hand, trembling ever so slightly, lowered the brush. The final stroke had been made, the last touch given. The painting was complete. Turning, he walked toward the window, his footsteps soft, almost ghostly. The city outside lay blanketed in obscurity, the fog rolling in, concealing the secrets of the night. He stared into the void, his mind adrift, his soul a whirl. Behind him, the painting was a triumph, a masterpiece. It was also a confession, a revelation, a glimpse into the abyss. It was a piece of him, a piece of his shadows, a piece of his madness. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he turned back to face it. His eyes met the eyes of his creation, and something passed between them, something unspeakable, something terrifying. A smile crept onto his face, triumphant and chilling, beautiful and grotesque. It spoke of satisfaction, of completion, of a job well done. It also spoke of something else, something darker, something more sinister. The painting stared back, its eyes following him, watching him, knowing him. It was a work of art, yes, but it was also something more. It was a piece of him, a piece of his soul, a piece of his shadows. How many others were there? How many other masterpieces, born from the depths of his twisted genius? How many other pieces of his soul, his shadows, his madness? The answer lay hidden, concealed in the shadows, locked away in the recesses of his mind. Only he knew, and he wasn't telling. Returning to his easel, his hand reached out to touch the painting, to feel its texture, its essence, its life. His smile widened, his eyes gleamed, his soul sang. He was an artist, a creator, a visionary. He was also something else, something darker, something more sinister. He was a monster, and his art was his prey. As our story comes to a close, let the lull of this soothing ambiance continue to cradle you further into your journey of calmness and rest. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your relaxation and sleep routine tonight. Remember, each day brings a new story, and each night brings a fresh chance to regenerate, to dream, and to become more of who you are. Good night, dear listener. Until our next story, sleep well and dream beautifully.